the next session. Okay, thank you so much. And everybody, welcome to today's fellowship. My name is Njoroge Wahome, or Jacob or Jack. People call me Jack. I just want to get to the right side so that we take not as much time as we take just only the amount of time we need to cover what we need to cover this evening. So my name is Jacob Wahome. I am the astrologer in Kingdom Touch Ministries, and if you find that a little bit hard to take, you can just call me timekeeper. Nothing more than that. Astrology is so much about us understanding the time we are in, because we know it's a domain. The domain of the celestial bodies was given the mandate and authority. And if you are participating, if you joined us during the debate last week, you find that the person who was my antagonist was speaking so much, seemed very offended by the term astrology. And I was just telling them, you don't have to. You can, if you don't like astrology, you can call it a celestial science or celestial timekeeping or something of a sort, because basically it'd be the same thing for us, because we don't have anathema to that term. We don't find anything that is strange. And actually, one of the things, if you notice, is that because that person was debating me, they could basically find nothing concrete in the Bible to oppose the points I was raising, or rather, even to support what they were talking. So what they did is they trolled through the church history from the Middle Ages right to the early modern age, trying to dispel the things that we were saying. And I was just telling them, actually, if that was the approach, I knew that I could have done the very same thing, but I chose to only use justification that is there, and that's very incontrovertible, but it's not even open to interpretation right there in the scriptures. But we are not yet to deconstruct that debate. We're going to look at what I call astrological, some of the terms we speak all the time. These are terms we have covered in the previous class. We did a whole 7-class series. For example, was to get equivalent to what you'd get like a certificate in Kingdom Astrology. And we did define every one of these things. So, but because I realize we have plenty of new audience, we should go to that. And today, I want us to talk about what is a house when you talk about a house in astrology. What do we mean? And I don't limit myself to our own understanding of astrology, although I'll be making that distinction as we go along. But I'm covering this one from the entirety of what the astrological world talks about. There's a lot of things that we have in common with other astrological systems, but even more that are completely distinct to our own system. And this one will come clear. So now, in astrology, when you talk about a house, it's not like there is some foundation and a roof and walls and windows there in the sky. It's not a house as such as the material house you're used to here, but in every sense, it is a house because it can have a host and it can have guests that come in and go out. That is the basically why it's a house. And as you go along, you'll be able to realize why that. But it's actually an expanse of heaven. You use 30 degrees usually. That is usually, but it's not very specific. Some people allow a different viewpoint that allow for something either less or more than 30 degrees. But what you realize, because the expanse of the heavens being a sphere, is that you divide it into 30 degrees, very equal measures of 30 degrees, measuring 30 degrees each. These are degrees of arc. You'll get 12 divisions, and then these divisions you can assign them numbers or names, and that is exactly what we do. But where do you measure this? Where are you measuring this? So we are going to use what, if you know the point where your west is and your east is, then you don't go along the horizon, rather you rise up the sky until you get to what we call the mid-heaven. We have two mid-heavens, by the way. They can be the upper mid-heaven or the lower mid-heaven. So I'm saying that if you draw a circle, beginning either from the east or from the west, go through the mid-heaven, and that but now, if you cover only the visible part of the sky, you'll have 180 degrees, and therefore you'll have 6 houses. These 6 expanses of the heaven, those are what we call houses. But they are not just the ones that are visible, there are others that are beneath the plane of the earth, hidden below the horizon, which are also 6 of them. each one of them 30 degrees. I think that should be clear. So a house is nothing more. That's a very simple way. It's just an expanse of heaven. But as I've said, some people interpret it differently. Ourselves, as you're going to see, it's different. Now, if you want to pay the highest fidelity to the truth, anything that you call an astrological house should measure. Let me change actually what I'm recording so that this can go out as a video, although later we are going to, why am I not getting currents right? Or even sure I'm getting the correct recording, but we recorded this one later. So it should, because it should cover, a house should essentially cover the entire breadth of the heavens. Now here I'm talking about the other way, because what you see is that the east-west expanse, if you're moving from the east to the west, that is where most of the changes in the astrological sphere happen. If you draw that line from the east, go to the upper midheaven. Upper midheaven is the place where you're standing right above you, and you go to the other side. Then that's actually like the theater of heaven. That happens. If you're going towards, the more you go towards the north, the more you stray away from that midheaven, the less activity you see. And actually, even the narrower and narrower the heavens will become until they draw to a point. That point is the North Pole. It does not change. If you go towards the south, you'll get the South Pole. So between these 2 points, so many people, according to us, let me just go to the next point. Most astrologers, and that is not us, only consider astrological houses as comprising just 12 constellations or 13 constellations. These constellations are usually called the zodiac constellations. Indeed, they are very, very important because most of the changes that happen across the heavens happen across these 13 or 12 constellations. If you refer to an almanac of the heavens or one of the what you call the catalogs, the very first person to standardize the catalog is this who wrote the Almagest. What do you call him? It's not Copernicus. Copernicus on astrology. And from that, but at his time, he could only see only the constellations that are visible in the northern hemisphere. So later, that has been standardized. Today, if you look at it, so I think it had about 70 or 60 constellations. But today, because the entirety of the sky has been mapped properly, we have about 82 of them. So this view, the one that is taken by most astrologers, of what a house is, misses out on so many constellations for which we believe there is still something that is a message for us to be able to understand. So for us, we do take that there are actually 12 houses. For us, we only consider 12 houses because houses for us are distinct from constellations. Constellations are actually hosts. For us, they are not houses. But for other people, they are synonymous. They don't differentiate between them. They don't make them distinct. So for us, even if there are 13 constellations, we realize that the houses they are a truth that is underlying the constellations. So even if we do have 12 houses, we do recognize that there are 13, actually 13 constellations. Some people don't consider the 13 constellations. Actually, this is the most widespread form of astrology that you can find. It only considers 12 constellations and consider them to be the houses. For us, that is not true. And we're going to see more as you go along. But for now, if you need to know, we're just talking about an expanse of heaven. If you want to understand what a constellation, like a 30-degree expanse of the heavens is, it doesn't matter how tall or short you are, but if you're a kid, your fist may be smaller. Let me just illustrate this for you. So I have to turn on my camera. Let me just turn on my camera and show you what I mean by how you can be able to identify an expanse of heaven that is 30 degrees wide. Your hand in front of you and you use a fist. So it's stretched as far in front of you as far as possible. That area of fist that what will cover, that's just 10 degrees. So that means if you place your hand on top of the other hand, and then you do it again, then what you've done, you have some circumscribed a celestial house. a very good clue, as you're going to see when I'm in the last section, the one I'm going to talk about the alignments and transits of this week, is I'll be able to give you visual clues that you can see. If you have clear skies outside, you can be able to go and observe these things. One of the things about astrology is very practical. It's not in a book, it's not in a website somewhere. It is the book of the heavens that is written, and that is what we follow. So that's what I've said. You can be able to see what, and you can try to do even this practically. Start from the horizon if you can see the horizon. If you're in the city, it's a little bit of a tough call because there'll be all sort of structures covering your horizon unless you climb up to a top to a building that is way above, and that one may give you even a bigger expanse and a view of where you are. So that is what we call a house. It's an expanse of the heavens, measures 30 degrees of arc, and it is, while other people consider it, these houses to be equivalent to constellations, for us, they are not. And for us, the other thing is that we consider them not to be just that narrow expanse, because the zodiac only covers a part of the sky. For ourselves who are near the equator, the zodiac is almost overhead, always. It's close to overhead almost throughout the year. Sometimes it moves a little bit to the south, sometimes it moves a little bit to the north. Right now, it's a little bit to the north because it's the path along which the sun is traveling, and the sun is a little bit to the north. It's just coming towards the equator. So it does that. For people who live in the northern hemisphere, the zodiac is always to the south, no matter what time of year it is. And those people who live in the southern hemisphere, too deep in the southern hemisphere of the earth, the zodiac is always to the north. So what we do consider ourselves is that can't be true, that only that expanse covered by the zodiac constellation comprise houses. But actually, if you measure that expanse, if that is the expanse of the width that covers a house, it should go all the way to the northern celestial pole, and any heavenly body that manages to visit that house in that sense, in that area, it is still within, can be circumscribed within a house. And any star, of course, that is also there is also within a particular house. And the same thing going towards the south. So then we don't have any contradictions in our system. That is the simplicity of our system. Now, when we talk about houses, it's not the same. Our astrology is not the tropical astrology or the Vedic astrology that is followed by Oriental cultures. Ours is what we call Neoteran Astrology. We are the progenitors, we are the originators of this idea and this school and this worldview. For us, we recognize, and we are the only ones who do this, we recognize two kinds of houses, of astrological houses. The first one is called a celestial astrological house. And that can sound like a what? What do you call it? Like an iron or some like a what? What do you call it? I don't remember the exact figure of term, but it seems like we are talking it. What if it's an astrological house? Certainly, it has to be celestial. But you see, in a minute, the others are what we call terrestrial astrological houses. Terrestrial would seem to imply that actually they are here on the terrestrial plane. The terrestrial level of reality is not a sphere, it's actually a plane that is flat, according to astrology. Yes, it's not that we are denying that empirically the world is a sphere. But in reality, when it comes to be able to do our astrology, we need to use that perspective that the terrestrial plane, the land on the earth on which we live, is a plane and is flat and is circular, some circumscribed by the horizon circle. So a celestial astrological house is called so. Well, both of them actually, they are all celestial, even the terrestrial ones. These houses, these kinds of houses, actually they speak about the same things, but it's all about perspective. So celestial astrological houses are anchored on the revolving celestial sphere. What we understand, what we see ourselves as stars and planets rising from the east and going to set in the west, is the fact that they are actually stuck on a sphere that is revolving all the time across our terrestrial world. And again, this is not because we are stupid. It doesn't mean that we don't understand that actually it's the earth which is actually turning toward the east, and that effect causes us to see the stars moving to the west. That doesn't mean. It just means that if you stop at that low level of reality, we'll be hidden to so many truths about God and about reality of of the world as we speak. I just something just struck me that Maybe I may not be recording, but I am certainly recording. And as I've said, you may stop at any moment and ask me to go back over points. That would be okay before you forget it. If you have a question, and there's no stupid question. So if you feel that it's important that I repeat a point, I do. I'm almost finishing with this word. So I've just said celestial is not a tautology. Tautology, that's the word I was looking for. Calling one of them celestial astrological house is not a tautology. It's just that we need to distinguish from where we are. So these celestial houses, so they move in every 24-hour cycle. At any one time, like if you measure what is at your midheaven, after 2 hours, then a different house will have come there. So it will be revolving, and by tomorrow point like now, again that very same house that was just about here, it will be there. If it's carrying, if that house at that time is playing host to a planet, then that planet, unless it is the moon which moves very quickly, it will still be in that house. Over maybe a period of a week or a month, that planet could have moved out of that house. That is the reality. So what the other thing to note about celestial astrological houses is that they are the same for everyone on Earth. On the Earth, anyone on the Earth, like let's say the Sun, like next week, but one, we are waiting the house to go into the Sun. Sorry, the Sun is going to be going into house number one to give us an indication that actually true. This is the first month of the year. That will happen for everybody. It doesn't matter which place you are in. Of course, as I've said, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you'll only be able to see that because the zodiac will be for you always to the south. And if you are too much to the south, you'll only be seeing it to the north. But the reality that the planet has entered house one will be the same. The moment at which the sun crosses into house number one, the gateway that goes into house number one is the same for us everywhere we are. Now let's look at the other kind of house, the terrestrial astrological houses. These are anchored on the stationary celestial sphere. The stationary celestial sphere is specific to an individual. Each individual, as we regard ourselves, that's an astrologer. And as I've said, you and myself, we are all astrologers, whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not, or we go die kicking against that reality, it will still catch up with us. It is the truth, and the truth is the truth. It's not beholden on whether you believe it or not. As I always say, the truth is not the truth because you believe it or you don't believe it. The truth is the truth because it is the truth. And terrestrial health, as I've said, they are specific to each astrologers or each perspective. And that one means it's not just actually even of moving across hemisphere. Every time actually you move, even the person you are sitting right next to, there is that small difference between the points of time that happen across each one. We carry our universes with us. Those are stationary universes. They're stationary so long as you are stationary. If you're moving, they are moving with you. If you move very, very fast, you can even move faster than the what, so that your what can start moving faster than actually the revolving the revolving astrological sphere. But wherever you are, it will be specific to that place and time. And of course, we should be able to move with that, even our what. But there is a place where you are anchored always, and usually the place that you call home, the place where you have ultimate authority and control. And every one of us, even when we are children, there's that space that you recognize as the place that is uniquely your own. Even a baby who doesn't know how to talk, there's a place, there's some place even in the house, whether it is next to the mother, that they will not allow you to really invade. Even ourselves, even the most is gregarious, socially, the what, open people. There's a space you want to retreat and you don't want anyone. That place, that place is the center of your astrological authority. And yeah, those are the basics what about what astrological houses are. Of course, I know I've introduced terms like zodiac, but the zodiac, we'll be able to talk about the zodiac and what is the zodiac constellation as we go along. And there's no we can come up with a way of approaching these terminologies and define them in such a way that they'll not require us to go into other terms. But don't worry, we are going to go and describe what is the zodiac and what all these other perspectives. But please, if you do have a question, you can ask. Um, Now I want us to go to look at the alignments at our place in time and what we are. Last week we didn't manage to look at this graphic. There was just a small mix-up in the graphics than how I store them. But this was the spread of the planets, and actually you can see they are almost spread almost evenly across the what. We don't have the unanimity we used to have just a couple of months ago about where the planets are. Of course, the ones that are most transient is there are these two. The moon is the most transit, as you can see. That time it was just entering the first house after they had met with the sun at the entryway of house number 12. So here they are in house number 1. And actually, these are the houses. These are the houses that we show here are the celestial houses. Sorry, I moved to this week. These are the 12 celestial houses I was talking about. These ones revolve all the time. Like when it is morning, of course, house like now, house number 12 is the one that is going to be rising across the eastern horizon. And when it's evening, it is the very same house that will actually be descending across the western horizon. Actually, that expands that I talked about, and I talked about the east, west, east mid-heaven to east, then mid-heaven, and then to the west. You can also describe it as east, or rather even west, mid, no, not descending, then go to mid-heaven, then go to the ascendant. You can begin that's another, actually that's the most valid way of describing it using astrological terms. So as I've said here, this is what, okay, I'm not using a very good pointer. Let me get the better one. So I was talking about these two being the most transient ones, the ones that move across the houses quickly. The moon only spends about 2.5 days, no more than less than 3 days in every house. Uh, the what Mercury spends about a month in each house, or sometimes less, depends on where it is relative to the sun. Like now, it's just about gathering speed. It's in retrograde. That means as you can see, it's now starting to move toward the. Okay, this was last week, by the way. There's no spend too much time on it. These are what even when we go, these are in retrograde, and when they're in retrograde, they actually move very slowly. They come to a sort of standstill. That is Jupiter. No, this is Saturn, and this is Jupiter. And then we have Mars here. We're just going into house number 9. And then here was Venus approaching the cusp of house number 11 and house number 12. And the Sun, of course, was in house number 12. It had just gone into conjecture the previous week. Let's look at today. As you can see, not much has changed. Mercury, because it just went to standstill as we began that very evening that we're beginning. So it's still moving slowly, and it will take a time actually for race to cross properly into house number 12. It's moving in retrograde. It's moving backwards. Retrograde just means moving backwards. So that means instead of moving across house number 1 heading towards house number 2, it is heading towards house number 12. And sometime later, just before the sun actually manages to cross into the house number 1, they will meet. But Mercury will continue on being retrograde, and it will travel further back. It will remain in house 12, and the sun will go back into house 1 for some time. These cycles, we have calculated them, but as I've said, this is for the inquiring mind that follows up. And I am so glad there are so many people who have managed to follow up on these things that for them and for us, there is such an opening. What I can attest you for sure is that these planets have started listening to our voices, and now they are actually unfolding some of the secrets that they have held for long, and nobody has been there with a right key to unlock them. And we just happen to be the people who are doing that. Um, if you see the moon, of course, has traversed all across all these houses. It's now in House Cabell. This is a very good indicator, by the way, if you want to know where the moon is for the next at least almost 2 days. The moon will be in Cabell. And right at one end of Cabell, you'll be able to see Saturn. So you'll be able to see another star. So if you wanted to know them for the next couple of days, the problem is the moon is becoming very bright, but it will not be too bright to cloud out Saturn. Saturn is certainly the amongst what it's only less bright, of course, than the Sun, the Moon, Venus, and Jupiter. It's the number 5, and it's quite pretty bright. So here we have Jupiter also in retrograde. That means it's moving in retrograde fashion, but very, very slowly. The retrogrades of Jupiter and Venus are even slower than their prograde. They are already the two slowest planets, but when they go into retrograde, they become even slower. So they are basically just stuck in place where they are. But if you measure their right ascension coordinates, you'll be able to see that every day they reduce by some significant seconds over one day to the next. And this is our is one of the major planets we are waiting, because throughout our time it is never gone into standstill. We have witnessed so many other standstills of all the other planets. It's only Mercury, it's only Mars that has not gone into standstill. But this is the year that it will go. That is why this year is so very special for us. That's actually that's not the only reason, but it's a major reason why. It's one of the reasons why. So here we have Venus. Venus, as you can see now, has crossed from house number 11, and it's properly now. Actually, it's just today, as a well, no, earlier, that was yesterday in the morning. The morning at the middle of Wednesday, the sunrise. That is when it was just at the cusp of the point where we could say it is no longer got influences of house number 11, and it's only got influences of house number 12. That is there. It's not going to move as fast enough. We have still a couple of months for it to completely catch up with the sun, because the sun also, remember, the sun is not stationary, it's also moving. So by the time even the sun goes through into house number 1, Venus will still not have caught up. So that's it. Those are the alignments and the transits that we are observing this week. Of course, there's nothing really spectacular about this week that we are awaiting for certain, other than the fact that the moon, of course, will change phase. We will have the full moon on the 15th day of our first month, and that will be when? Actually, that will be Sunday. On Sunday, that is when you're going to have the full moon, and the moon will stop growing, or it will stop waxing, to stop growing brighter, and it will get a little bit thinner. So let's look at our calendar. These 2 months, there's no general sign, there's no general major access point that is going to happen this week. But of course, next week is the big one, the descendant equinox. It will be on a Friday. This is a bit of a this is not next week. Yeah, the other week. It's the other week, not next week. It's the other week after the next one. So this will be a very crucial day, the 27th of our month, as we come to the end of our month, and that will be an essential marker for us. That's it for our astrological insights. But as I've said, if you have any questions, you may go ahead and ask them, and we will answer them. If you have remarks to make, the same applies. My device is getting what I need to connect it to the battery before it goes off.